South Street, I lived in South Street, and of course 62 shops and houses went in that street alone. So it wasn't very pleasant, you know.
Now, I hear there's a bit of a story, though, about South Street, because, is that right, you had some sort of funny feeling about the bombing?
Oh yes, I did, because we were last shop down on that side, you know, and my mum and my gran, who was very elderly, said they couldn't stand another night without sleep. So we decided to go to relatives just for the night, you see. So I didn't want to. Didn't want to leave South Street. So I went upstairs and I stood in my mother's bedroom, which looked up the street and down the street, and I thought, goodbye, South Street. I won't see you again. And I was crying. And, well, being a good little girl, only been 12 and been told what to do, you know, I went gradually with them to relatives for the night, and that was it. And I never saw South Street again, only in ruins. But I was so upset. I wanted to be here in it, you know. I thought I deserted it. That was the thing.
All I can remember about it was a terrifying experience. Coming from a very quiet village, we lived in a very secure sort of a existence, never went anywhere. I never went out of college until I came to Exeter that day when I had to come to the Art Infirmary. And the whole thing was quite an experience for someone very naive to the outside world. We grew up in a sort of secluded area, you know. We never went out of the town, and I couldn't understand it. That's what sticks in my mind. Why would somebody want to do this to somebody else's place? I really couldn't understand it. It didn't frighten me, but I just couldn't understand why. And then when they started bringing in the dead, about 4 o'clock in the morning into the Art Infirmary, which they used as a mortuary, then reality really struck home. And eventually I did get up to the city to see the devastation. And that I just couldn't understand it. Why? Now, when I walked up through the town here just now, I must call it a city, mustn't I? It all comes back to you. And the noise and the planes coming in at rooftop height, you know, it was just an open door for them. They just simply came up through the valley and did what they had to do in the name of Adolf Hitler. And that's how it all evolved.
We were out at Tedbent St Mary because my dad, when he had a drop of petrol, would take us out into the country, and he left us in the hedgerow, a 5-mile hill, and the farmer came down and said, you can't leave these children here, you must bring them in the farmhouse. So we stayed in the farmhouse where we used to go quite regularly, and eventually I spent my school holidays there. So coming back that morning, we could see the city was on fire and lots of smoke around, and my mother said, if our house has been hit, we'll go and stay with Auntie Hilda, which was her sister, and they had a shop in Paris Street. Well, when we got back, of course, our house in Powderham Road was okay, and Paris Street was demolished, so we didn't have to go to Paris Street. We were okay as children. There were 8 of us in our family, 8 children in our family. Eventually, my brother joined the Air Force, and 2 sisters went to the WAF, and another one went in the Land Army, so that left 3 of us at home. We had a very happy childhood, and the war didn't bother us at all. We weren't scared, my parents weren't scared. My mum always said, it's all right kids, it's one of ours, when the planes went over. It wasn't, of course, because you could tell the sound of the aircraft. German aircraft had that sort of throbbing noise.
How important do you think it is that people remember what happened?
Very important, because a lot of people lost their lives, and some gave their lives, firemen and ambulance people, policemen, women, all sorts. I had 2 sisters in the WAF. Fortunately, they survived the Blitz, and my brother in the Air Force survived. But people must remember it. You shouldn't forget November the 11th. Nothing should be forgotten. Everyone should be taught in school. Our history is part of our background.
And people had to sort of go to the passages here in Exeter.
I didn't know that until I met Gina doing the interview, and she said people sheltered here. Then my sister, who was married to a soldier who was away in the war, lived in 26 Parish Street with my aunt and uncle. He had a funeral director's business there. And they crossed the roads and went into the vault, the wine vaults. Landmine landed on the building and they had to be dug out the next day. But I had no idea that people came down the underground passages until Gina told me. Yes, but quite a safe place to be. Because a lot of people were killed in the centre of Exeter, all around Newtown, Parish Street, Cheek Street, all around there. It was absolutely demolished. We lived in St Thomas. We had 1 or 2 bombings there. I remember Barton Road was bombed, just at the top of Powderham Road where we lived. And I remember that. I can remember hearing the building fall, yes. That was the only bombing near us in St Thomas, but there were other bombs dropped, Exwick Cemetery and Woodar Road and further down in St Thomas. Yeah, but it was quite an exciting time for children. And if the sirens went after midnight, you didn't have to go to school the next morning. So that was quite exciting. You think, oh, God, we don't have to go until after lunch. Yeah, but if they went before, then we had to go in the morning.
I was like 14, 15 years old.
And what was your job during the Blitz?
I was a clerk for a lawyer in Bedford Circus. Nichols & Nichols they're called. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But then the Blitz started and we had to be volunteers for fire watching. And if you volunteered somebody to do their job fire watching, which meant you were on all night, you could charge them. And I used to get 3 people to fire watch for. And 7-6 a week on top of wages you were earning was a lot of money. So I did 3 fire watches at different firms in Exeter at that time.
So you're quite an entrepreneur then?
Not really, no, desperation.
So just tell me, what do you actually remember when obviously the Great Blitz, the Blitz actually happened? What was it like?
Frightening, really, frightening. When the sirens went off, we didn't know what was going to happen next. And we were, the group I was with in Bedford Circus, we went to the cellar of the Devon Exeter Savings Bank for safety. But unfortunately, when they had the Blitz, they were all killed. The people who were in that cellar on that night. I wasn't on that night, thank God. But
I'm going to ask you that question again because my head got into the shot. It's my fault.
Hold the mic in the other hand.
In the other hand. Oh, that'd be better. Okay. So, and the night of the big Blitz, can you remember what happened?
The night of the big Blitz, I was not on duty, but I was in where I lived at the time. And when the sirens went off, we as a family went into a cage underneath the table in the house we lived in. And everybody did the same. We all had cages. We went in. That was it, really. But
what was it? Was it noisy? What can you remember?
No, the siren. I remember the sirens and the noise was unbelievable. Bombs dropping, colossal. And we were kids, wild, desperate to do anything mad.
And what about the day after?
Well, just walking through they wouldn't let you into the town, but we managed to get in and see what was happening, and really it was unbelievable. You couldn't believe the devastation. But we were kids of 15, 16 years old and anxious to have a look, see what we could find. I remember what happened very well, really. I mean, I did the fire watching. We did it. Lots of things went on, obviously, all the time. We were running up and down the roofs on the properties. We were kids, and we jumped from roof to roof. I remember running down Queen Street on the roof of the properties that were there. Get out the attic window, and then off we go. Playing, really.
And how important do you think it is that the anniversary, that people remembered what happened?
Absolutely vital to be remembered. I mean, at the time, you don't think anything of it, really. It's just a great game. But looking back now, you realise what a terrible situation it was. But anyway, we're still here, and I'm still working at 92.
We had a shelter in our garden, and when the sirens went, Mother and the next door neighbours went down into the shelter. we stayed upstairs in our house with my father did for a while, and all of a sudden we heard a crash, and we went upstairs, and then suddenly it come through the back window in there and landed, luckily, into a chair, which my father could grab and throw out of the window into the backyard. So then we went downstairs, and he went to see Mother, and they'd all left the shelter and gone. So they said, well, he said, we better go and see if we can see where they're gone, because up through the St. Sybil's was a series of these big shelters. So he took us there towards the Odeon, and I went into a shelter, and Mother was in there. So I went to get to my father to say Mother was in the shelter. And of course, an explosive bomb, I think there was only one in St. Sybil's at the time, came down between the Odeon and the shelter. And my father caught the blast, and of course that was the end, but I didn't know it was. They soon whipped the bodies away, so I didn't see it there. I had to go in and say, well, when the siren goes, we'll have to go and see if we can find Dad, or what's happened to Dad. So Mother then couldn't go very far, so I said, well, there's a couple of school chums. I said, could she go to your house? So they said yes, so they took her to their house, and I went looking for Dad. And everywhere I went, oh, they said, oh yeah, he's down the other place. So, and I go there, and they say, no, oh yeah, but he's on duty somewhere. And then eventually a bloke said, well, he said, I got a kid telling you fibs. He said, I'll tell you the truth. He said, unfortunately, your father's been killed. And, well, of course, a bit of a shock. So then I had to go up and break the news to Mother. So
how old were you at the time?
14.
And was your father a police officer?
No, he was a special constable. He had his own electrical business during the day, but in the evenings and that, in the war times, you could do different voluntary work, and he was a voluntary special constable. He was in the First World War, but
quite a terrible, shocking thing to happen to someone so young for you to have to deal with.
Yeah, it was a shock, definitely. I'm going to say the thing was that I had to grow up quick. And Mother was just no good at all to me. She just collapsed and was useless. She went to live with her sister at Torquay. And I lived with my gran then. I went down, and every time the siren went, I used to come from my gran's in Lombard Street back to my own house to leave me poor old gran.
Do you remember people sort of taking shelter in the passages?
No, I don't, no. I never knew they used those passages, to be quite honest. They did in the wartime, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too far to walk for me, because we had these surface shelters in St. Sybil's, so naturally we went to there. But there, it was, they just pulled me off. They wouldn't tell me for a long time that he'd been killed, but eventually they did, and of course then I broke it to Mother, and she was a mess, and she went to Torquay with her sister, and I went with my gran.